I'm fortunate to work in a workforce where I have extremely powerful women, but our male leadership is also taking on the role being equally nurturing, compassionate, and thoughtful in their approach, and the women are becoming more assertive, and they kind of blend.
If you're just wanting to boss people, that's not leadership.
A hallmark of being a good leader is being able to say, I was wrong.
I think there's still a lot of pressure from women to be able to balance home and family. And that's why they don't excel sometimes at work, because they're afraid they're not going to do it well. Both genders really have their own challenges with workplace.
Oh yeah. Setting an example is not the main way of influencing others. It's the only way. But I was not behaving like a leader. I was just walking around thinking that I knew everything. That doesn't qualify you.
Today, I am excited to welcome Linda Sistrunk, who's the Director of Behavioral Health at Memorial Health System, and Janice McFarland, who's the Director of Clinical Service at Life and Purpose Behavioral Health. And today, we are going to talk about women in leadership. We're going to really dive in and talk about the dynamics of women in leadership, the struggles, the benefits, anything we can to really highlight the importance of women in leadership. So, hope you guys enjoy. I was thinking we would do women in leadership with just me, and then thought that
maybe not the best representation.
Probably wouldn't go over well. So let's invite two women who have demonstrated the concept of women in leadership. What has your journey been like to leadership, or maybe kind of like what drove you to leadership?
I don't feel like I chose leadership. I feel like leadership chose me. I have never had a job in my entire life where I'm just an employee, where I'm just clocking in, clocking out, and leaving. I was always aware of a problem, even when I worked in food service for decades. If there was a problem, I wanted to solve it. I can't just sit back and know that there's a problem and not try to do anything about it. It's really not my DNA.
I would actually agree. I think that over the course of my career that I found that even in entry-level positions that my opinion or my desire to grow a program or my desire to be actively involved in everything that was going on was so strong that it either led me to change jobs or grow in the organization.
So that's interesting, because both of you guys saying it chose me. So then there's often, and one of the reasons why we're bringing this topic of women in leadership is because people identify that that's an issue, that there are issues with a lack of maybe women in leadership, or how people have to struggle in that. And so then there's this push for people to push women into leadership. And I'm curious, is that the better way? Is that the better way to push people into leadership? Or if it happens organically and it's maybe seen as part of your own identity as being a leader?
I think there's a difference between the verb push and encourage. So this article that I found, because I wanted some kind of like representation of the way that women in leadership is being talked about in like relatively recent media. Because I kind of wanted to compare and contrast, like what's our experience been like versus how are people trying to report about it and encourage women to be better leaders.
Right.
So this article, which the link is in the description below for anybody who wants to read it themselves, they say that there are 8 C's of an effective leader. 1 is communication, 2, commitment, 3, courage, 4, character, 5, creativity, 6, caring, 7, confidence, and 8, competence. So you can encourage people to grow in their confidence and their competence. And I think that is probably the main barrier to women feeling comfortable to step up and grab an opportunity. I feel like most women, and this is, again, there's going to be huge generalizations, so don't quote me or think this is how I feel all the time. Right. But I think if we're talking about most women in most situations, which we work in a female-dominated field, correct, so we kind of have a leg up a little bit as far as our careers go. But, working in food service for all of that time, like a man was supposed to be the shift lead, a man was supposed to be the general manager. Like it was odd if you had a female leader, because I think essentially what it comes down to is like as women, we are not ever encouraged to celebrate or be confident and feel and think about ourselves as if we are competent, let alone tell other people that we think that we are competent. It's almost unladylike.
So do you
do those things.
Do you feel that that's overt or kind of implicit, like unconscious, like people are not necessarily, it's kind of like similar to things like racism, where there's overt racism where people are actively trying to oppress, marginalize somebody of color, but but there's also that implicit where people don't even really realize how they're
Right.
treating people or thinking about that. And in your experience, and you brought up like that food service, but even in kind of our own field, is that implicitly experienced or explicit like experience?
I think it depends on where you are. I think there's some families that are female dominant. I work with individuals who are very outspoken, very confident, essential to being in a leadership role because their mothers, their grandmothers, it was a female dominant household. And it was, very matriarchal system. And so they come in naturally as leaders. I think that in our home environment, that determines more of how we come into the workforce as females, how we were listened to, how we were engaged with as growing women, and whether our voice was able to be heard or we were comfortable using our voice. Oddly, I didn't start using my voice truly in the most effective way till like my late 30s, which is, because I didn't have a home system that my voice was able to be used effectively. I couldn't speak about my opinions or my wants and my needs, and so I didn't. I don't know if we still see it as systematically in society as strong as we used to. I think it's still there. But from my standpoint, all my work history has always been female dominant. I've always had female bosses. The hospital has very strong female leadership roles. And so I didn't necessarily feel it in my work environment as much as some other places have.
Were your female leadership role models positive? Like, were they
Not always.
Like, was the
Not always.
experience good or?
Not always. It was interesting. So I had female role models and supports and supervisors who were more traditionally, I hate to say it, but I think we know there is a
He's here to
male,
be the counter-transference.
So I've had...
I'll take it on.
Yeah.
Well, I think there is
Well, that was
I
one of my
think,
questions.
I saw a really big difference in the supervisors that were more geared towards work comes first, home work-life balance is not important. You need to be submissive to the rules or you can't work here. That type of personality for me felt more like a male dominant type of personality coming from a female, if that makes sense.
So that was my wondering is like, if women want to be leaders, do they feel this need to lead like they think a man should lead? Now, just because we identify those stereotypes doesn't mean that the way a man leads is effective, because that maybe sometimes those misconceptions about what a good leader is more genderized than really trying to look at what are the qualities of good leadership.
So I do think that over time, women have been expected to behave more like a male-dominant workforce, and males have been forced to be more female-oriented in their thought process. So gender roles believe that males are more assertive, more pressured at times through work stuff, have less of a work-home life balance, and females are more emotional and a little bit more forgiving of certain things. And I think we've come to a point now where those personalities aren't just female dominant, but males are now more vested in becoming more work-home life balance, more understanding, more gentle in their approach. So I think it's gone both ways.
I think a huge shift that we've had at the agency, all of our departmental supervision, really every leadership position that can exist in the agency is held by a woman except for our CEO and our HR. Everybody else in a position of leadership is a woman. And the first C that this article talks about with communication is talking about how successful work environments have more like female associated traits when it comes to communication. We're more open. We are less closed off. We are honestly and genuinely, transparently communicating about everything. And what we've seen is that when anyone is able to do that, like your workforce loyalty just skyrockets. There are people who they may not like all aspects of their job, but they enjoy the people that they are working for, working under, working with. Stressful times are less stressful.
From my standpoint, as a female, my desire to be a natural caregiver was a very big barrier for me when I first became a leader. And so the traits that make me inadvertently female, because I do think there is a difference between males and females. I do think that our brains sometimes work differently. Sometimes they mesh,
absolutely.
but I think sometimes we just think differently. And I think some of those traits were actually a hindrance for me to become a good leader, not because I'm female, but because they hindered my performance. They hindered my ability to be objective. They hindered my ability to be consistent. As I tried to work through becoming a leader, I had to let go of some of those natural things that I do just as a mother and a female, and had to try to relearn some of the processes and communication patterns because they weren't effective in managing people. Not as a female, but in managing people, I could not give like I would in my personal life.
I've had to do the same, but flip it, reverse it. So my mother's side of my family is very female-led, very matriarchal. However, in my household, it was much more traditional. Dad's in charge. That's just kind of how it is. And, you know, most women grow up to be their mother. I have somehow grown up to be my father, just reincarnated.
For better or for worse.
For better, for worse. Yes, absolutely. I think I had certain innate qualities that, like, leadership chose me, but there's a difference between being able to be a leader and being a good leader, being
Correct.
somebody that people want to follow, that people want to learn from, that is a positive influence. Because, like, if we're just talking about telling people where to be and what to do, that's not particularly difficult. But being a good leader required me to change almost in opposite ways that it sounds like you had to change. I had to become a little bit more soft, a little bit more open, a little bit less rigid, a little bit less black and white, make time for casual conversation between, like, getting things done, because that's not typically how my brain works, because I got Bill's brain. And he task-oriented, very successful, no shade to my father, but I had to overcome opposite things in order to find, like, that happy medium in the middle.
So I am currently nurturing 2 new leaders that I would like for them to become leaders. And I just had that conversation. You said, you know, do we push people to become leaders? And I have 2 females that are working with me who I believe are natural leaders. They have the ability to
it's already within them.
It's already within their DNA
They just haven't
structure
recognized
because they've recognized it. They're just not sure that it's what they want. And I had that conversation right before I came here, and I sat down and I said, you know, I want this for you. Do you want this for you? Because maybe I'm pushing you to be something that you don't want to be right now. But I believe in 10 years you're going to be me. You're going to be in my spot. And
I've had that conversation with people too.
It's up to me to nurture that. But, you know, so I do think that it's a process that started back when I was, 19 at my first job. And I knew it when I was 19 that I was not going to stay in an entry-level position. I knew it, and I never did.
Or what
because I became involved in everything I could become involved in, and naturally was inquisitive about every aspect of what I was doing. I mean, I just wanted to do more and more and more. And my energy level and my passion grew every single day I was on a job. That if I did not continue to grow, I would not stay. I become bored extremely easily.
So
in a work job, I mean a work profession. So if I'm not evolving or staying stagnant, I will not stay at a position.
Yeah.
Well, and part of me is like the thought that's triggering in my mind is the difference between leadership and being in a higher position. You know, like if you're just wanting to boss people, that's not leadership. What do you guys see as being leadership? Like, what is leadership and how do you define that? Because you're saying that's within you, and one of the words I'm hearing is passion for what you do. Right. But I think obviously it goes beyond.
So I've tried it both ways. I've tried walking into, I ran nursing homes for years, and I tried walking into a nursing home and telling people what to do, and they just looked at me like,
that's funny.
Okay, yeah, that's not going to work, right? And they can turn on you like that because I didn't earn the respect and the, I didn't prove to them that they should listen to me. So for leadership, and I think really, I'll be honest, I'm close to 50, I'm 50. And so I think I just am now getting to the point where I feel pretty confident as a leader. If I had to lead in a different area at this point, I think I could walk in and understand how to be politically correct, how to guide my staff in a gentle way to get them to grow and to evolve. But that's just now coming. I'm just now getting to the point where I feel pretty confident that I have the skills that I should have had when I was an initial leader.
I've had good experiences with leaders and supervisors, bad experiences with leaders and supervisors. One of the C's that this article talks about is character. Direct quote, setting an example is not the main way of influencing others, it's the only way. And then it goes on to talk about integrity, being a good role model for the people that you work with. That to me is what leadership is. Anybody can talk the talk, but people want to see that you can walk the walk. If they're going to trust you, if they're going to be honest with you, if they're going to be open with you, if they're going to take the time, they need to know that you care about them. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
That to me, and again, there's always a balance with that. Like we've talked about before in business and leadership, I can genuinely deeply care about you as an individual from an administrative or leadership role, but at the same time, make a business decision that may appear as if I do not, because businesses need to run, decisions need to be made. And being able to be honest with yourself, being able to walk in and be like, you know what, guys, I don't know everything, and I don't need to know everything in order to help you guys be the most successful. The most powerful teaching lesson that I have had about how to be a good leader is not getting a supervisor position at the agency probably 3 or 4 years ago. You didn't tell me at the time, but I was behaving quite not positively. But it was
just to bring it up.
No, but we bring it up a lot because it really was like the most positively powerful thing that has ever happened to me, because at the time I was the most knowledgeable. I built the program that we were hiring a supervisor for, but I was not behaving like a leader. I was just walking around thinking that I knew everything. That doesn't qualify you to be a leader. Being a leader is more than that.
Right. It's not just the knowledge of the program. We can, that would, So
there are a lot of really smart people
Right.
that never become leaders because they don't want to. They don't have the innate characteristics. There's all types of reasons. But to me now, like making sure that my character is correct is like the most important thing to me because of that experience.
And it wasn't intentional for this reason, but I think one of the reasons why that was such a like powerful learning experience, or at least kind of made you more ready for it the second time, was that you kind of took a really painful experience and learned from it. You know, whereas if you continue to go down that road of, oh, I can't believe they did, you know, and get really bitter and disgruntled, you know, that would just demonstrate that, you know, because leadership, at least from my experience, you get knocked down a lot, and you have to learn how to take those punches and be able to just deal with a lot. And it's not, I don't think people really understand it until they experience it. And I didn't understand it until I experienced it at a certain level. You think you're leading in the way that is way, and then all of a sudden you get some pretty harsh feedback going, oh, you know, I wasn't reading things very well. So.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of self-awareness. It goes a long way. So I say to my staff I say it almost weekly, that I am very self-aware of my own personality. And I am very self-aware of what triggers me, of where my room for growth and improvement is, or where I am confident. And when I initially started out, I wasn't aware of those factors. I was still young and little out of my league in a lot of ways. And I wasn't able to say where I needed to work on my level of greatness. Right? I just thought I was great because I was a young 24-year-old social worker who knew everything. I knew everything. I knew exactly.
You had it all figured out.
Yeah, and I knew everything
impressive.
Everybody was doing wrong, and I was mouthy and nobody. You know, eventually it got to the point. I did grow, fortunately, because I had great mentors. Who would sit me down and say, you know, you're great, except you need to tone it down sometimes. Your body language, or how you sit in a meeting, or how you use your voice actually matters more than what you know right now. And so I was very fortunate to have male and female leadership who really took the time to invest in me to make sure they mentored my personality.
And I don't know that I've ever had somebody feel comfortable enough professionally to sit down and say those things to me. I mean, like Doug and I have
It's
conversation
uncomfortable and
about
it's
stuff,
not much fun, but it is nice.
But I found a place outside of my work life and my personal life. I found a place and I found a tribe to help do that for me. I had to go seek it out. And really, I think the first time that I knew that I could be successful in a leadership type position in this field was after I didn't get that position. And I walked back upstairs to my office, and the entire agency, every person, immediately, messages, phone calls, texts, everything. What happened? This is bleep, maybe Tyler, bullshit. What happened? This is, we're not going to work for him. We're not going to blah, blah, blah. I said, it was a Thursday that this decision was made.
She remembers. She's like, hold on, let me pull this out. I remember what I was wearing. I know.
No, it was after IOP, so it was approximately 2 p.m. But the reason that I remember it so clearly is because there's so much emotion tied to it, so many like complicated emotions that I've had to come back and revisit. And so I told everybody, I was like, listen, everybody can bitch until the end of the day on Friday, and when we come in here Monday, the decision has been made. We are moving on. We will do our jobs and work as a team. This is a decision that's been made. And then when people said, okay, you're right, and then followed what I said, I was like, oh.
That felt pretty good, too.
I was like, maybe it's not just about me being snarky and sarcastic. Like, maybe there are other things about me that people find helpful or inspiring or, whatever that they want to be around. I was like, maybe I can lean away from like the negative snarky side of my personality and lean into some of those positive things. Because until that moment, all of my worth was caught up in like how witty and sarcastic and like sometimes cruelly funny I could be about situations.
That is a life lesson. I mean, I also was mentored. I was fortunate enough to have really positive work mentors and leaders, and I still do, who really hold me accountable to my personality. And, as I was young and I say mouthy, I was quite mouthy in my work profession.
Girl.
I was
Same.
not in my personal, but in my professional I was.
Exactly.
Because I felt very strongly about what I was doing.
Because I felt competent.
They were able to give me enough pushback to not deflate my passion and encourage me and mentor me. They just allowed me to be who I needed to be, but gave me the little sideline stuff like,
because the
they gave me the look, okay, Linda, that's enough. The stuff that I needed to grow. And, that's hopefully what I can do for somebody else is try to temperament the things that are not going to make you a positive leader without crushing your soul.
Well, and the other, like you have to, you have got to like take the temperature of the people that you are serving, like of your employees, the people that you are supervise. Like if you don't take temperature and if you don't check in, you're going to become completely disconnected and ineffective. So Memorial Health System is a massive business. Ours is luckily much smaller, but we operate within hierarchies. If the idea that the only person who can give me feedback or help me stay accountable is the people above me, he's the only one that's allowed to tell me about myself.
Right.
I need more people than that. So the people that I work with, the people that work for me, work with me to get programming out to people, if you see something, say something. Like nobody is not allowed to give me feedback about myself, about how I impact you, how good or poorly you think I'm doing my job, what I can do better, what I maybe need to drop and leave at the door. Because the second that I say, like, you're not allowed to give me feedback, my mind goes back into that very arrogant, very self-centered space that I was in a few years ago where I was not qualified to lead. Right. I can't look at people as their job description.
I can still be arrogant.
Oh, I can too.
I try not to be, but periodically it still comes out.
I've started. Zoom
but I have to know
really
when to pull that out and when to become a little bit more
when to stay
confrontational
in my lane.
or a little bit more.
And this is probably more unconscious, but is that a result of the need to oversell or overprove or show because you feel like that people are not going to see that in us? What drives that?
I actually feel like I'm just really good at certain things.
Okay.
I mean, and people think that's arrogance, but I know certain
It's James
things,
Harden.
and I know the way that things should occur. And so when I emphatically speak about it, it's because I can back it up
Right.
with enough information that proves that my point is accurate. So I think it comes across as a little bit more odd when you can't back it up with your history and your work performance and your knowledge, and then it comes across as just odd. But I think when
I also go back to arrogance versus confidence. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I was just
Arrogance
gonna
would
say,
be more
sometimes-
of like, I would almost see arrogance more of where you are speaking the same way but can't back it up. Like you can't
I
really-
think I use those interchangeably. I don't necessarily think arrogance is a bad thing. So maybe it is more confidence, because I work with a lot of knowledgeable people, and sometimes I'm like, wow, dang, they are really, they come across as really strong-willed personality, and I find myself more engaged with those types of personalities because they are the most knowledgeable personalities we have.
I consider myself to be behaving arrogantly when I am engaging with other people about a topic that I feel confident or competent in, and I'm not listening. If I am not listening to the feedback, if my mind is not open, if I am not teachable, I am behaving in an arrogant manner.
Well, because the belief is that I can't learn anything from
Exactly.
the people there.
I know so much that what
Right.
use could you possibly be of me?
Now, and I don't know if arrogance is the right way, but I am certainly more outspoken and forceful in community settings as a leader than in, like, if I'm passionate about the need for a decision to be made, and Linda and I have been in similar meetings where we're advocating for the same thing and trying to illustrate those things clearly so people kind of recognize, no, we have the right process here. So those are kind of things, but I tend to kind of try not to be that way.
I think maybe
Internally.
the difference between arrogance and confidence is how you control your body language and your voice.
Are you
So,
reacting to
or my
things that-
reaction.
yeah.
So I would say maybe when I was younger, I was a little bit more arrogant. Now I'm a little bit more controlled and confident, because I had to learn how to control my temperament. And I don't know if that's a female process, but I think any more males also have to do that. I think, when I started out in leadership, there was a huge difference between male leadership and female leadership about our expectations and how we spoke and how I walked into a meeting. I'm very fortunate now I can walk into a meeting and feel equal to the male counterparts that are in the meeting with me, that I don't have to respond differently, that they are supposed to respond in conjunction with how I respond to different things that occur in our workplace.
And I think another example of how kind of the opposite of the spectrum, like, because I more closely identify with like my father's character traits, and so my natural instincts are a little bit more maybe like masculine than feminine. Is I don't know that there's ever really been a room that I've walked into and not been like, what I have to say is important. I don't know that I've ever, I don't know that I have ever walked in a room that I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to listen because I really don't know what's going on. No, I walk into every room thinking that I know a little bit of something, sometimes a lot of something.
She walks into my office with a theme song, you know.
I really would if I could. And it would change by the day so that he could quickly feel out my mood. Back to the idea of like being forceful and outward and coming off as arrogant in meetings. There are a lot of isms in the world still. And I am now 32 years old. I was given a very powerful position in behavioral health in our community at the age of, I think I was like 29, 28 years old. And I'm a white girl who was in her 20s from a comfortable middle-class family. Like, those are a lot of isms to overcome to get people to believe that I deserve what I've been given.
Right.
And so sometimes for me, the over-speaking, the passion, the arrogance, the confidence is because if I don't show up that way, am I reaffirming to people who believe that I don't deserve what I have, that I didn't earn it?
Yeah, but I think that's probably more externally to the community than internally because,
Well, yes.
like your first experience, everybody expected you to get the position and were
Right.
shocked when you didn't. And so that tells me that, people were receptive to you.
Yeah, but
And
Outside of my agency, though, I'm on so many
externally.
community committees and things, and then like trying to start the resource center. And I've heard people make statements that, you know, I'm handed everything, that I haven't earned it. And if that is your perception, you have not really been along for the journey.
Right.
And so
Which
figuring out how to...
I find interesting. Like,
Yeah?
Well,
What part of it?
that you haven't earned it. I don't know what that...
Well,
what
I think that
looks like.
I think the expectation is because I was as young as I was. It's almost like I hadn't struggled enough
Right.
to be that successful. Do you know what I mean?
But
that's just
like
my perception.
internally or from the community?
Externally.
Externally?
Internally, everybody was very excited.
Right.
But externally, it's always been external.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think that every leader has a fan club, and I think every leader has a bigger group of individuals who don't think they deserve that spot.
Right.
So I have a new leader who's working with me, and I said, let me be very clear. As soon as you take this position, you're not going to be liked.
Yeah.
As soon as you step into this role, people are going to talk about you. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
So whether or not, and I think, and I know that that's what occurs in workforces. I mean, people do it every day. Everybody talks about their boss, you know, periodically people say things. And when you become a leader, that portion of it is probably the hardest portion to live with, that you're no longer one of the guys, no
Yes.
longer in the group.
Oh, yeah.
And-
Well, if you change.
yeah, and you
kind
have
of
to
part.
you have to taper off those personal relationships a little bit and conduct yourself a certain way to continue to be an effective leader.
And I had really, really close personal relationships with people inside my agency when I took this position, that I was pretty clear that, like, I will not be terminating this personal relationship. But over time, they have had to change and adjust so that everybody can do their jobs appropriately and maintain appropriate boundaries.
Right.
It has to
Yeah, you
change.
can't,
I didn't
you can't
me
escape
included.
that.
I didn't try to change it. It just
You
happened
hope that
over
you
time.
can balance it, but it almost
Right.
you just naturally kind of
Yeah.
finds its way to separate
Yeah.
a little bit.
Well, I think it naturally does with each mistake you make.
True.
True, right? I mean, the reason we learn those coping mechanisms and those strategies for leadership is because we screwed up in our early leadership. You know, and as a female leader, in all of my past leadership roles, I was friends with everybody I worked with.
Yeah.
I mean, we were very close. We knew everything about one another. We sat in the break room together and, you know, talked and talked and talked, and we hung out after work, and our kids were together. And so I think that was probably the biggest challenge for me, because as a female, my natural support system becomes the women I work with.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if guys do that. Do you guys do that?
Yeah, do you do that?
I'm just curious because I don't necessarily think guys do it as much as girls.
I don't
do
think
it.
they do.
I'll tell you, it was more like that, I would say, when I worked residential, but people, like, you worked so much.
Yeah.
Like, you're there all the time, and so you naturally, that's what your social network comes. But when you work at a place where you go in and you finish your shift and then you go home, I think it's probably more likely when I didn't have family.
Yeah.
Now it kind of separates it, but my relationships, I feel like, are strong with the people I work with and the people I lead. But yeah, it's not a go out and that changed too.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't do that anymore.
the social side
Yeah, I
of things.
stopped it. Yeah.
But have you ever tried to supervise somebody that had more experience than you?
Oh, yes.
Oh, it's horrible. I think that's horrible. I think that is one of the worst
That's a challenge,
positions.
right?
It's I actually have struggled with that historically. Not in a lot of mine were folks with more tenure than I had, who have been in certain positions longer, who really were solid in an organization, and then I had to come be their boss. And I struggle with that, not necessarily as holding people accountable, but as a respect issue.
On your part or their part?
Mine. I
Okay.
feel very respectful towards people who have really worked through the whole journey of a profession and have grown with an organization. And I still I'm much better with it, but it is a respect issue that I just respect them for where they have been and where they have come in an organization. So that was a tough one for me.
Yeah, I mean, as the director of clinical services, the way the hierarchy is laid out within our agency, I am technically supervising our medical director, who has a DO and is a board certified doctor.
Right.
And I think I don't have to know everything about everything. I just have to know what I am doing and then lean on the people around me to be great at what they are great at and listen to what they have to say to find solutions to the problems. When somebody has more experience, different experience, more tenure, more education, my goal isn't really to like, it's not really to supervise, it's to manage. Like I don't need to micromanage you. I don't need you to report every second of your day. I'm looking to just guide. Make sure you don't crash into the iceberg.
Chances are they're independent in their job and you don't have to do those things, hopefully.
And then I think the flip side of it, when you don't figure out how to engage people that have more experience than you, the risk is that you come off as if you aren't supportive of that employee or don't or aren't interested in that employee because you're like, you know what, I have to have. I remind our MedSom supervisor, Carrie, I just had the conversation again with her today. I said, you know, I have weekly scheduled supervision with every department supervisor except for you because I've worked with you for so long and I know that you know what you're doing, that I don't feel the need to check up on you. Not that I feel differently about the other folks. It's just I had a working relationship with her before I took this position. And I was like, Carrie knows what she's doing. She doesn't need me. Yeah, she does. Right. It's just in a different way than it was before.
I've said I use the term, you know, when I speak to folks that I don't necessarily think I have to give that much supervision to, that it's not about micromanaging. It's about being an operational leader.
Yeah.
And in order for me to be a leader in the operations of this program, I have to engage with you, and we all have to understand the importance of what we're doing, the philosophy of what we're doing. We have to stay consistent with communicating that message. So it's not always about what they're doing as much as it is the philosophy of what we want out of a program.
As a leader, being able to recognize the different experiences that your employees have had with previous supervisors or administrators or whatever, and individualize your approach to people is also, you can't carbon copy everything. Like I remember you talking about when you took over at Presley and you called somebody in and shut the door to have a just a check-in conversation. They like immediately started bawling because every time the door shut before with a boss, that meant that you were in
trouble.
Big trouble. Like being able to recognize that and be patient while people adjust to a different type of leadership. A different type of supervision, a different type of administration, because it's less, I always get like authoritarian and authoritative. Which one's the bad one? Which one are we not supposed to do? Parents in the room.
Authoritative?
Yeah, like as we move away from like the authoritative and we move to like a more collaborative model, at least within our agency, and I know that you try the same thing, Linda, we have to be patient with people because they are not used to that, and it does not feel comfortable to them
initially. And in general, my personality is not very patient. I really like, let's do this.
Yeah.
And then that's what I want. Like, let's do it. And then that's
Douglas.
People, you know, I'm very.
I was waiting for that.
I just think everybody thinks the way I do.
Yeah.
And we're changing some processes in our environment. This morning, a couple of my staff came and they said, we need to meet with you. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, we just don't, you know, we just need more communication about this change. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. You know, to me, I've already communicated it to them. They still are feeling uncertain. And so we were able to talk a little bit more. And then, you know, it's very, I think this is a new leadership style from what I'm used to, where bosses now say, I probably didn't communicate that well with you. You know, I probably should have sat down. In my mind, I thought I did, but I didn't. So let's go over it again.
Right.
Whereas I have to say my history with a lot of leaders, not my current leader, has been very reactive. A lot of my female
like you should
leaders.
have listened when I told you.
Would get offended if I said that they didn't communicate well because somehow that was a personal.
Like defensive, instantly defensive.
I've had a lot of defensive.
And if not defensive, a lot of passive aggressive communication then going forward. When you
I would say a lot. I mean,
table.
I've had a couple, you know, who really just didn't engage with the natural.
And you might assume that it's a deficit on that person for not hearing you in the past.
I think it was. I think it was an expectation. I think that sometimes some of the female leaders I worked with believed that the approach was supposed to be like you said. I walk in and this is how it is and this is what we're going to do. And you know, I've been in this for 30 years. So you're talking 30 years ago as a female leader from the ones that were in charge of me. they kind of had to do that. They had to figure out their way differently than we do now as leaders.
Yeah, because you couldn't really create your own identity. You had to fit
It
the
was
mold at the time.
pretty tough, and I think fortunately for us, we're not coming into a workforce that really expects us to be different than, you and I should be the same in how we respect people and engage with people. So, but starting out, I saw a different type of leadership.
Learning how, as a leader, as a person, as an employee, as whatever role you're in, looking at failure as an opportunity to grow. Love like sports documentaries and stuff like that. So I think I've watched The Last Dance, all 10 parts, like probably 6 times all the way through by now. And there's one part where Michael Jordan is talking about like not winning a championship or something. And somebody asks, how do you deal with failure? And he says, well, that failure taught me how not to succeed. It taught me how I'm not going to get to what I think that I want for myself. So now I know what road not to go down in the future. It's not like that was all for nothing because I didn't get the trophy at the end of my season. I learned really important things about how to prepare for next season. And that's how I try to look at every time that I fail, whether it's a one-on-one interaction with a supervisee, whether it's missing out on an opportunity that I thought was owed to me. Like, there is something to be learned every time things don't go the way that I want them to.
But I don't think that's a natural reaction as an early leader.
Oh, it is not.
So I think that's something we can all now say because we've had those things occur to us. I think in order...
And you might be in a safe environment to be able to do that.
True.
Because I think part of that is just you feel threatened by mistakes. Like, is that going to be the demise of my career or
I've worked in
leadership?
Environments where if I messed up one time, I could have been walked out the door.
Yeah.
Luckily, it never occurred, but almost every single person I've worked with in that profession who had the same job I did had lost their jobs over mistakes.
The example that I always bring up about that first supervision experience with my staff was, I remember sitting in an HR training about this new innovative way to supervise called progressive discipline. And I'm like, and I was like, oh my Lord, like this doesn't make them feel better because every time you write somebody up, they're
again,
right.
Again.
It's just like you're just stressing the heck out of them. Like we're not solving anything. We're actually just making people more anxious. And
progressive discipline would work with somebody with a temperament like mine, because like, write me up, whatever, don't care. What is that going to do to me? Nothing. But other people are very, like, I joke about former employees that we've had and like how easy it was to kind of get them in a tizzy just to be like, hey, can you stop by my office before you take off today?
Right.
And like, really, I just wanted to check in about a case, but sometimes I purposely phrase the text message to kind of get them wound up, which was awful and terrible of me.
Just not good leadership.
No,
by the way.
But
whatever you do, don't do that.
Yeah, but I had good enough relationships with them that I wouldn't have done it if I didn't know them. But there's a quote in this article that says, if your current work environment doesn't give you a sense of belonging where you feel supported and communicating honestly and openly, find a new work environment.
I say that all the time. I think there are plenty of jobs out there that if you're not satisfied in the one you're working in, that you should always look at other opportunities. You should give things a fair shot.
Right.
But if it doesn't fulfill you and it's not the right spot, there's nothing wrong with moving around.
Yeah, just maybe don't use like
Can't get
company
frustrated
technology to
out
look
of
for a new
everything.
job. That's kind of frowned upon. Like, don't use your work computer to look for a new job. Maybe do that on your smartphone. I feel the same, but I'm not encouraging you to leave just because you're unhappy with something. Like, if you think that there is a better, if you think a better opportunity exists, I encourage you to try to go find it, because without taking the time and taking the risk, you'll never really be fully happy because you don't know, because you never took the time to look or explore or experience something different. If you need to go try it, even though you know that it may only last a year, go have that experience.
So that sense of belonging and women in leadership, I think, have a connection because I think by nature, women are more relational than men.
I
So
agree.
you're able to foster a sense of belonging in the agency because of your ability to socially connect, and whereas men tend to be more like task oriented, not so much, not that we can't build relationships, but we would
Just
rather
different.
manage the group as a whole than to individually connect. Now I try to not fall into those traps, but I think there's a natural benefit to women being in leadership in terms of creating that environment where there's a sense of belonging, so that people can feel safe, people can feel at home, and in the sense of people accept me.
Well, and I think the hardest part for me right now, and tell me if it's the same with you, but where I'm located at on the hierarchy, on the flow chart, there are people in the agency who it is more appropriate for me to have those kinds of relationships with, and then other people where it's counterproductive of me to have a really close, really open, kind of free-flowing relationship. Because if I'm doing that, then am I getting in the way of them having that same vibe with their immediate supervisor? Am I leapfrogging?
You don't want to be too close to somebody
if you don't directly supervise
so
them,
that because there was a period of time where we were trying to implement a change in the flow chart, and I was very personally connected to everyone in that particular department, and I had to make myself sparse and tell them to go to the other person that we were trying to transition to because they felt so close to me because of a bunch of factors that it wasn't natural to go to somebody else. And if you don't know where the limit is to that natural kind of tendency to have closer relationships with people, like, you can actually get in your own way. You can make things harder for yourself if you don't pay attention.
I've kind of learned that very clear. I'm very clear cut that, this is your supervisor, this is your supervisor, this is your supervisor. When it comes to lunchtime conversation, I can converse with anybody. But when it comes to process change and work initiatives, I'll say, I might have an opinion, but I'm going to tell you my opinion doesn't really matter because it's really your supervisor's decision. I've had to really, really do that throughout my career to make sure I didn't step on toes.
Yes.
Because it does tend to irritate people. Like it does just naturally if you have an opinion about somebody else's work environment. And you have to do it in a politically correct way.
Yeah.
Or attempt to.
Yeah, because I don't know that anybody can ever nail political correctness.
Yeah, at least you can try, and we try to adapt to it. I'm not always politically correct, but I try to really be conscious of how to do it correctly.
And when I mess up and hurt somebody else and step on somebody else's toes, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm sorry and asking how to do better in the future. That is not weakness. I feel like that's, like you were saying before there wasn't leaders admitting that they had made mistakes. Now I feel like that is like a hallmark of being a good leader, is being able to say, I was wrong and I'm sorry. I messed that up. That was my fault. I'm sorry.
So it's interesting you were talking about, getting back to gender roles. I still think, and we're late in the conversation, I still look at the leaders we're trying to grow, and I still look at my female generational leaders that I know that are going to take over our spots one day, saying things like, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to pick my kids up.
Yes.
I'm afraid that I'm going to miss out on ball games. I'm afraid that, and I still think there is still, I think a lot more males say that, that more than they used to, but I still think the struggle is real for younger female leaders to feel confident in being a good partner, a good parent, a good friend, and having a work.
And
I don't know if I see that as strong with my male counterparts.
And I think that's
younger.
I think that's driven by the women in the home. So
on who?
There are some homes where the mom takes 90% of the parenting and does all that, and the husband's there to work and do all the but like in my household it's like near 50-50, if not it's very much we share the load. And so there are days, I stay home a lot for my kids when they're sick and things like that, based on those types of things. So I do think that there are definite elements
traditional
to that,
roles
but
with families.
Certainly I think it's certainly more prevalent that women have to worry about that burden than men do.
Yeah, because I get asked all the time, like, you're 32 years old, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? I'm like, I don't quite frankly know that I want children. That seems like a whole lot of problem that I don't want to deal with. I want to be able to prioritize what I want to prioritize and do what I want to do, and not put that cap on myself, not put that ceiling on myself of, well, this is only as far as I can go, because then there has to be balance on the other side. If it happens,
which is not what you hear, which is interesting because that's not a common thing I would hear from a male.
Yeah, when has a man ever said, I don't know that I want children because I want to make sure that I can grow in my career.
Right. So I do think it's still there. Now, do I think it's as prevalent as when my mother went into the workforce? Absolutely not. Do I think there's more consideration to males being more supportive for that work home life balance for females? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I think we're equal? No, I don't. I don't think it's equal yet. Now, I think in some households it's equal.
Right.
But do I think systematically it's equal? I think
No.
there's still a lot of pressure from women to be able to balance home and family. And that's why they don't excel sometimes at work, because they're afraid they're not going to do it well. If a male works, 60, 70 hours a week, it's honorable.
Right.
It's honorable because he's taking care of
Yeah.
his family. If a woman works, 60, 70 hours a
selfish.
week, and again, I don't think that's, I think it's better, but you still hear it.
Nobody ever asks my boyfriend, what does your girlfriend think about how
many
often
hours
you
you
work and the way that you spend your downtime. But people who don't
Right.
even understand,
Right.
like they've never met my boyfriend, or like, oh my gosh, and you live 2 hours away? How do you make time for him? He's fine. He won't die. He's not a
Right.
plant that needs to be watered.
Right.
He's a fully sustaining ecosystem. Like, he doesn't
But-
really need me.
Yeah, my son, who's coming into the workforce, he's 23, will tell me that, as much as we battle that, males battle the idea that they have to be assertive, aggressive, and work 60 hours, 70 hours
Yeah.
a week to provide. So
We have to provide.
So yeah, you have to provide so that one does not supersede the other as fair as being unfair.
They're just
Right?
different.
They're different, but that males go into it with people having the perception that they have to excel and exceed, and that they should be high performers at all times and work any hours, and so I think it's both genders really kind of have their own challenges with workplace.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's still very clear stereotypes and isms around each gender when it comes to the workplace. And one is not, like you said, heavier than the other. They are just different.
But
It is
they're-
different burdens and different loads that
Right.
people are carrying. I mean, being a woman, I would think that, trying to balance like 17 different hats and be the primary child care provider, work like you don't have kids, and parent like you don't work is impossible. That seems overwhelming to me. I look at the women around me, like even Kaylee sometimes, and like literally anyone with children. No, you are not a woman, but you too. Like, how I know how much energy and passion and everything it takes to do my job and do it to a degree that I think I'm doing it well. And so then to have this other like massive role, these little people that are walking around with like your heart inside of them. Like, I can't imagine what that's like.
Just because people do it doesn't mean that
They do
it's
it well.
that they do it well or that it's working. So
Right.
like that gets me in trouble all the time. My own personal sense of responsibility, things that I like to do, work to a certain degree is reward, like is how I seek reward. The thought that was popping in my head was I had leadership positions before I had family, and before I had real significant relationships. So if I had the family and significant relationships before I had leadership, would I be in leadership?
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. Maybe, but maybe I wouldn't be as driven or for those types of position. I'd rather have a position that allows me to not worry about those things. So now
Yeah.
I'm trying to go to a really leadership position. Now I've got the bug for it, and I can't
Yeah.
Now you can't let it go.
Yeah.
Can't stop
And,
Right.
and I'm at a place where it's like, okay, there's no turning back, but it's hard to balance back. And so I think that that would be true for women too, if that order
it's-
sequencing.
It's so
of
much
It's
harder
impossible.
to coach a female who already has a family to get comfortable with the idea of being a leader
Right.
than it is to take somebody like myself who's unmarried without children and be like, hey, do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are no limits on my life. I don't have to think about anything but myself.
Right. I
It's
can
so much
dive-
different.
I can dive completely in and not
Yep.
have to worry about it.
Yeah, but
Yep.
I love watching the new reform of workplaces where, because I get to witness it, where we have males in leadership roles who are sometimes more compassionate than our females and more engaging, much like you appear to be as a leader, because Doug, you're very approachable and you talk about your family and the work home life balance. And so I'm fortunate to work in a workforce where I have extremely powerful women, which is very encouraging for me to watch. We are a female dominant leadership in many ways, but our male leadership is also taking on the role of being equally nurturing, compassionate and thoughtful in their approach, and the women are becoming more assertive, and they kind of blend. And so the way that they lead is really consistent among all of them. Like whether they're male or female, they really do lead the same way, because it's just an expectation of how to be a leader. It's not gender biased. It just is, this is the expectation of how you lead. And I think more workforces are becoming that way.
Yeah, I think we're changeable in that way, and we can.
I think more homes are coming that way, as evidenced by you being a 50% partner or more at times, and vice versa, right?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
And so I think that hasn't been the norm either.
Where do you think the state of women in leadership is at right now? It's not in the worst possible place. I mean, how would we evaluate or rate kind of where women in leadership is at?
I think there's two different ways to measure it. I think what is the availability of opportunity and what is the perception of women in leadership. I think that those are two different metrics. For an area such as ours, for a rural Appalachian area to have so many women in positions of leadership, superintendents, directors of all kinds of stuff, is wonderful. Clearly there is an availability and an openness, but is public perception, have we left some stereotypes behind? I don't think so in all situations. I think when you hear that a woman is in charge, I still think there's this kind of almost groan about like, ugh, I have to deal with her. Or like, ugh, it's a woman, so she's gonna lead with her emotions. Like I still think there is a bit of stigma behind it, but the availability of opportunity, I think, speaks a lot to what's coming next, to what the future is. What do you think, Linda?
I think women in this area, I've been very open about what I see in the workforce, and I still think that it is a struggle at times for women to believe they can grow in a position.
Yeah, it's self-belief.
I still see a lot of entry-level women who should be leaders, and so I don't know if that's more of a home perception, and it comes from a generational determination in your home environment that you are this role, and therefore when you come to work you're going to continue in this role. I think we have, in many places I've worked, the absolute hardest working people in the world are working women. And they stay in the hardest position for 20, 25 years without growing into a leadership role. And that frustrates me for them. Yeah. But some of them are just really happy. So I guess
that's
I guess that maybe that's just my perception of where they could be, but they really have the opportunity and the ability to grow, and they stay here because of their feelings of self-worth. Or
this article makes a point. There's another direct quote that says that women work twice as hard for half the recognition.
Sure. Which
I think is what you're kind of talking about. We see women putting in so much work.
It may be like, we talked about, it may be environmentally induced, not necessarily because they have to. So other areas, maybe women are the hierarchy and men have to work a little bit harder. I don't know where that is. Trying to think where that might be, but there may be somewhere. A lot of women underexcel because of the responsibilities at home that set them back.
Yeah, and there's also nothing to say, like, obviously, as women in leadership, we want to see every woman who has even a whiff of capability be given an opportunity and coached up and take the chance on herself. But some people just don't want that. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting it, but like, make it be a choice, like an informed choice. Don't just give up before you start because you can't see the solution to stepping up and getting into a different type of work or a different angle of work.
I feel the need to mentor women more than men to believe that they are able to be leaders. I think in my profession, I'm not sure that I have taken as much time and energy to sit down with a younger male and say, I really want you to grow in this environment, and how can I help you have a good work-life home balance and make you feel confident? I don't know if I've actually had to have those conversations with the now that I think about it. I mean, I think I probably have. I'm sure I have at one point, but I think it's more historically women.
And work is about more than your paycheck. Work is about more than your title. There are lots of reasons why people work, and there are also lots of reasons why people don't work or do different types of work. I think that stay-at-home moms are the most underpaid employee, like, ever.
And dads.
If you find if you find purpose in the work you're doing and it keeps you at an entry level position, if it finds purpose and it fills your cup, keep filling your cup. Like there's nothing that says that you can't fill your cup except to move up the ladder and take on more responsibility. And like nobody says that.
It's not
but
for
just
everyone.
don't limit yourself.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, Linda, because I have worked in a female-dominated profession, and I don't think that I've had any females like overtly
Talk to you that way.
talk to me about being a leader. I don't know if maybe people just thought that I didn't need to worry about that. Like they didn't need to worry about that, but
I know, but how many people have talked to you about it? It's
right.
interesting. Yeah, now that I think about it, I don't know if I've. And is that fair? Is that fair that you shouldn't have somebody take into consideration
what I would
what you
say
need, or
is
did you
to provide
naturally
you
just
support
do it?
to get there?
There's probably a perception that more women need encouraged to have the
Definitely.
confidence to be able to step than men. But what I would say is that there are probably men that maybe secretly or privately want to be a leader, but don't have the confidence
Sure.
and do need that. And so ultimately, if we can be attuned effectively to the people that work for us, we can draw out what we need to draw out. And I go back to kind of the beginning of the conversation of forcing, and like when you see someone naturally being a leader, can you draw that out kind of without feeling like you're forcing it? Like, I notice you do this or that, that's really awesome, and to see if it naturally kind of happens and then put them on that road. Because I wonder if there are people. I think there's males in our organization that don't have a desire to be in leadership, but we would say, oh man, they would be a really good leader. But they don't, and that's okay.
Being able to ask the question of the people who work, air quotes, for you, and have them honestly answer back with how they feel, like comes back to a communication style and flow that is inherently kind of feminine, if we're talking about innate skill. To create a relationship where you're allowed to tell me no. Like just because I say, hey, I think you'd be really good at this, you're allowed to tell me no. And like, no, I'm actually quite happy where I am. I've had those conversations with women.
I've also had those conversations with men recently.
Oh, really?
Where I think I have a male that I work with who I think is a natural leader. I just believe his personality, his ability, his style is naturally just dynamic. And he'll say, I just don't want to do it. He's like, I don't really want to be in leadership.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, so I mean, that's interesting too, because I automatically think because he's a male,
Right.
that he's going to want to excel and be
Right.
in leadership. And he's like,
Yeah.
nah, I'm kind of cool where I am.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, good for you.
Yeah.
And we think it's honorable.
Yeah.
Women, we think, oh, why don't they want to do
They're
it?
missing out on an
they're missing
opportunity.
out.
I can't believe they're not taking this
Jeez,
up
I feel
on
like
this.
such a jerk now that we've talked. I'm like, God, these
See, we're
gender
learning
roles. I thought it was
something.
really cool, but yeah.
But I mean, I think ultimately it's. We always talk at our agency about succession planning. So I mean, people have to step up. So we have to encourage people to lead if we see the quality. I think it's important. Oftentimes we find ourselves in autopilot, so we have to also be more overtly aware of the dynamics at play and paying attention to those
Well, and I also like
inferences that we
based
might
on
be wrong.
individual perception of what people think a leadership role or position is also like a huge determining factor. Because this fellow that you're talking about, if he's like, I see how many meetings you have to sit in,
Sure.
Linda. I have
Sure.
0% interest in doing that. There are people that probably look at my position and
Think you
I
don't-
think they are perfectly capable. They would be wonderful at it, but they just refuse. They find their purpose in providing like client-based services. Everybody's different, and just because you have a quality to lead doesn't mean that you have to step up on the hierarchy. You can lead in a lot of ways that don't put that pressure, that still fill your cup. That, mentorship positions is something that we talk about a lot at the agency. Like, how can we help people find purpose outside of what they're doing to try to prevent burnout? But at the same time, like, you have skills. If you want to use them, let us see if we can be creative about how to kind of help you fill your cup, like at a more rapid rate. Instead of waiting 2 weeks for your cup to fill up after it's emptied from client work, maybe we can every week have you leaving feeling fulfilled because you've been given an opportunity to provide client care and maybe some clinical supervision to somebody, or be of value to your supervisor by being a leader and helping people stay organized. Or, there's the ability to be creative within a system, I think gives the most opportunity to people, but not every system can allow it. Ours does, because really Doug just decides what we're going to do and what we're not going to do, and then we do it or we don't do it. Jamie, our owner, is luckily very
so dominant, Doug.
well, we sometimes remind him that he also has a brake, not just a gas pedal. Again, I don't know if that's possible in bigger agencies and companies, like large health systems.
A lot of things you have to.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting to watch. I think that having a male perception, a female perception, is really healthy in a work environment. And I think they bring. I mean, I think both of our perceptions bring something really great to the workforce. I have a twin brother, and he and I are almost exactly alike in so many ways that. But it just tweaks just a little bit because of our genders. I think it's interesting to watch if you have a male and a female that have the same personality and have the same philosophy. Sometimes that doesn't always work either. He and I always fight for who's in charge. Like, we're very dominant. We're very dominant. Like, I want to plan the day and he wants to plan the day, and I want to do it this way and he wants. So, but we're very strong-willed. Sometimes I think a lot of it is just personality, whether you're male or female. But
I think that's a conversation for another segment because I think how does just natural personality. I mean, most of the female leaders are very confident, dominant.
It's interesting
personality.
And if you're not, you don't. I mean, I think it takes over your soul. I mean, it's hard if you're soft. If you're too soft, I mean, leadership will destroy your heart.
Yes,
I mean, it's rough. It is not always positive.
Right.
There's a lot of great things about it, but there's a lot of things that will just tear down your confidence.
Sure. Well, any last words about this subject? I think we have talked about a lot of great stuff, both about leadership in general, but then women in leadership. I'm sure we didn't completely cover everything. So, but that's good because cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So
dot. Maybe we'll make this a series too.
Right. So, thank you both for joining and sharing your wisdom and passion for everything leadership, and then specifically women in leadership. So,
thank you.